What's up, everyone? Listen, what if I freaking told you everyone has been BSing you about how to get wealthy? I'm sharing the screen here to the 80/20 money tree here that I have drawn up from 17 years of experience of how I've done it and why this whole myth you hear, this fallacy of the seven streams of income is what all wealthy have is a bunch of freaking bull crap. So let's get ready, everyone. Listen, what is up, everyone? And welcome back to Elevating Beyond with a two-word mission statement: change lives. Let's get into it. So, in getting into this, the whole like every wealthy person has seven streams of income is pretty true, except no one explains how you get there. And actually, at first, you need to focus on one main stream of income before you get to a level where you're branching out to having those seven streams of income. And I'm going to talk today. I'm going to be sharing my little picture here of the 80/20 tree of how I've done this personally over the past 17 years. And seven streams actually looks a lot more like 20 to 30 to 40 streams over the years. People just don't talk about the 30 of them that have failed. Okay. So it's not just like you have these seven perfect magical streams of income and they all bring in this percent and that percent and it's all wonderful and magic. You have so many freaking failures along the way. And I'm going to tell you personally how I've done it and what I mean by when I share the screen here. You see on the left the Mark's Money 80/20 tree, and on the right, the first part of building that wealth. And that's where I have the 80%. But actually, at first, in my case, you're putting 100% into this. And that tree trunk I talk about, because people ask me, like, when should I start branching out, like in my business and my company and doing all these other things? And like, I get it. I'm an entrepreneur. So I know what it's like. We see like shiny objects, we get bored, we want to chase things. And that's very important. But you have to do this very strategically, or else what will happen, that's why I have the picture of these trees next to me. If you don't focus on building that full, strong, not just tree trunk first, but the roots that have to go really deep for some years, if you start branching out too quickly, then what will happen is when those storms hit, it won't be able to weather the storm because the roots aren't deep. And even if it's a regular snow, if a tree doesn't have deep roots, the branches, it'll fall over. Like the weight of what will happen with the storms will knock your freaking tree over. And so, what I'm going to teach you to do is build that firm, strong tree trunk up first with those roots deep so that at least 80% of your wealth is protected to weather all the storms. And then, when, why, and how from real life experiences to start branching out into those other areas of wealth. What I have for the 20%. And I'm going to explain it all. I'm not going to over freaking complicate it. If you're watching this and you're seeing next to me, I have one of my like stick figure drawings of the Mark's Money tree, the 80/20 tree. And while you've been doing the seven streams of income the wrong way, and in the middle, where it has the tree trunk, it says 80%. And number one for me, it says Dream Shine, which, if you haven't heard me before, that's my company that I started in 2007. It's now been 17 years. It's crazy. But I have Dream Shine in the tree trunk for that 80%. And underneath it, I wrote 100% for 7 years. I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. But then, if you look over to the picture to the right of me, You'll see the tree branch books, podcast, speaking, stocks, real estate, angel investor, and I'm also going to talk about some other things that I've invested in and done that have worked and haven't worked, but how I've done this to now fully branch out. And then you see the 80/20. It shows the 20% being allocated to these different branches at different times. Now, I'm really going to simplify this. I'm just going to keep it real for my own stories to not over freaking complicate it because so many people get this so mixed up, messed up, or aren't even actually taught it. They just have heard and love to say it. Every wealthy person has 7 streams of income. So, how do I immediately get going on those 7 streams? And you're setting yourself up to fail. You've got to focus on that one stream first, which for me was building my company Dreamshine. All right. Bada boom. I just did a little pause action there, pop back in. So for me, it was building my company Dreamshine. And so before I even had a book, before I even started a freaking podcast, there's no way the first like 5 to 7 years, I had to be working constantly on building my company for our people with developmental disabilities. Like the CEO at first, you're the chief everything officer. You're freaking doing everything. You don't have money to delegate out a bunch of stuff. You're like barely just trying to get by. You're scraping, you're starting something from scratch. That's like your company. It's like a newborn baby. It's in the baby phase. And anyone that's had children, a newborn, needs all your attention. It can't change itself. It can't feed itself. It can't walk on its own. You got to be there with it constantly. As the baby starts to grow a little older, it still needs you, of course, but you can start backing off a little more. As your kid gets to like 5, they get to where they can start changing themselves with some help, of course. So you're not totally backing off. I mean, like you're 5, you're on your own. As they get to 7, they can be a little more independent. But with companies, what I see people do is like 3 months in, they're like, well, I need to start branching out into books. I need to have a book. I need to start doing stocks. And cool. That may have worked for like one person or something. But again, those roots won't be planted deep, so the storm will hit, and you'll just have 2 things that aren't deep, and they'll freaking knock over. So you've got to keep investing in that one main thing. And by the way, I have 7 years at 100%, and then I continue to do 80% because it's not like after 7 years, I just start going all in and all these other things. That's not how it works. You continue to keep investing on what you keep becoming the freaking best at. I just interviewed 2 guys, 2 business owners that I met with in Miami Beach, like 3 weeks ago. I sat down with them. They have built a $40 million a year company, just the 2 of them, and they have like 11 team members. And I was talking to him a lot about business. I'm even going to post some clips of it. And I'm like, what's been one of the keys to how you guys have really built this successfully? It's crazy. They've had it for 17 years now, too. How have you done it? And they're like, Mark, what we did was our main company does importing and exporting of liquor. It's not that deep. It's not that complicated. We continue to become the best at what we do, and we've continued to do that one thing for 17 years. He's like, no, I don't own a bunch of real estate and have that as a bunch of investments. I don't do all this other stuff with stocks. For us, we've continued to do this one thing for 17 years and we're not stopping. And they've built a $40 million company and they're not even close to done. They're explaining to me how they're importing, exporting, and how they keep adding each different country when it makes sense. Because I asked them, I'm like, well, does it make sense like with you guys exporting and the cargo? Have you ever thought of like owning your own cargo ship and getting into that? And they're like, no. They're like, that would be totally out of our lane. It wouldn't make sense. He's like, it's way more time efficient for us to hire that part out and stay focused on where we're experts in. And hey, it's not as sexy, it's not as glamorous, but they have built between the two of them a $40 million a year company, 17 years in. And they're on path to be, it starts to get more and more exponential. Soon it'll be $100 million a year company. All right. So that's amazing. That's work for them. Now, what I have done with my company, Dreamshine, is for the first 7 years, 100% all in, doing everything, investing everything in it. And then as we grew a little more to, I'd say we were serving around 25 individuals with developmental disabilities and had maybe 7 team members, because now 17 years later we serve over 60 individuals with developmental disabilities, have over 20 team members. That's not even close to including subcontracted staff. That's W-2 on payroll. And we have a 2.5 acre campus. We have the waterfront lodge, a log home, our freaking amazing pirate ship building, over 10 vehicles that we do transportation with. We're getting ready to acquire a property across the street, and we're continuing to expand. And I'm not ever stopping with Dreamshine. That's my baby. It's growing up now. It's a teenager. That's my life right there. And so as I start to branch out in these other areas that I break out, it's a 20%. I still always keep going with at least that 80% in the main trunk of my tree, which is Dreamshine. Okay. So then when I got 7 years in, what I mean by 20% is you got 80% in your main thing, and then 20%, whether you're investing it at a time in one thing or breaking it up into all the other different things. I personally continue to keep that main 80% in my main tree, knowing that if something was to happen with some of that other 20%, don't get me wrong, it hurts and it will hurt, but it's not going to be enough of a storm to knock your whole tree down. Okay? So I'm going to pull this image back up. I think I'm going to keep it up most of the time. The Mark's money, 80/20 money tree. So like 7 years in, what I did was I started thinking, okay, it's time to share my story. I personally believe in God, and I'm about following your purpose in your different levels of your purposes in life. And God started being like, it's time now for you to share, Mark, your story of being in jail at age 17, what you went through, how you've overcome that. And that's a whole other story in itself. Because I was like, I don't want to do that. What are people going to think of me? All this stuff. Of course, it ended up being the opposite, the authenticity, opening up. But anyway, I started thinking, okay, well, people know what my company Dreamshine is, but like Mark Minard isn't known yet, and people are going to have to know who Mark Minard is if I'm going to be wanting to get a book out. Like I wasn't even on any social media other than stuff that we were doing for Dreamshine. There wasn't a Mark Minard account. Now you can see Mark Minard on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, every LinkedIn, everywhere. and YouTube, of course. And I was thinking, all right, well, a podcast. So the first episode of this show, I didn't have this fancy studio. I was sitting in my car, like, man, it's been like 8 years now, 9 years. Crazy. And did the first episode of Elevating Beyond podcast. The audio sounded terrible, but I was real. We shared the story of overcoming jail, adversity, and that authenticity. And it was audio only at that time, continued to take off and got us to a point where we were actually in the top 100 in iTunes, which is freaking awesome. We weren't really making anything off of it, by the way. And so I continued to invest in it. And then at the next level, I'm like, okay, my first book. Let me hold it up here. The Story of You, transforming adversity into adventure, taking your dreams to the next level and beyond. Forward by my good man, Dan Miller, New York Times bestselling author. And now it's the bestseller by Mark Minard. So I started investing. It's not only money, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, but time. Time's a huge investment. So you got to keep thinking of that 80-20. And I'm thinking, because if I'm putting 100% of all my time into totally something else, then over time, if you're not taking care of that tree, the roots can start to wither away. All right. But then, as in my other book, which came out years later, 16 Reasons Why Your Business Sucks, how to be freaking awesome at every level of building your leadership, profits, and building your own dream team. Boom, another bestseller. I learned how to self-publish that through going through this whole process. The first one, we had a publisher. That's a whole other story. I'm not going to get too deep into that. And that talks about different levels of building your business, building your leadership, and the key to how to actually build your culture and your team so that you're able to start being able to invest that other 20% of your time and energy and money into doing some of those other things. And why I have the tree branches coming off of it is it all interconnects. So I tell my team this all the time, like, we all win together. This book becomes a bestseller. It helps makes a bunch of revenue. That still helps feed the Dream Shine tree. We all win together. All right. And there's other stuff that I've tried where before my second book, 16 Reasons Why Your Business Sucks, came out, there's a dude I work with. We made a whole course. I spent like 6 months to a year working with him, doing videos, putting this whole course together. And this guy ended up to be a total fraud, screwed me over, left the country, went to Canada, switched his company's tax ID so there couldn't be lawsuits on him, switched out. His name's Ken, by the way. I'll have to pull up his last name. I've exposed him on other shows. But got totally screwed. Was a huge loss. However, since I'm following that 80-20 rule, as you see on the tree, it wasn't enough to bring down the whole tree. It freaking hurt. It killed me. It sucked. But it also taught me wisdom. So if I was to have put 100 into that, then it would have toppled down the whole tree. This is what I talk about with the 80-20. All right, so I have the podcast, I have the books, and then throughout this, it starts leading to some speaking events. Again, time. You got to be able to invest your time and energy. At first, my speaking events, I wasn't getting paid for them. I was paying for my flights. I was going to places. I was doing book signings, and I was using it as, I'm thinking in my head, this is advertising for my book. This is getting the word of mouth out there even more. Okay? So then over time, it continued to build up. I had to keep investing in that, investing in my company. You're still focusing. And by the way, there's no like perfect balance to any of this, just like life. Like there's different seasons where that 80% of your tree, it's not always going to be perfect. something may be going on with the main company. You got to put that 100% into it, full focus, be like, nope, I'm cutting some of those other branches off for now. In this season, I can't even focus on that because at the core of it all, the trunk is the most important thing. Don't get it twisted. You cannot let that die. Okay. So there's different seasons, things have come up where we've had to battle things. Maybe we had something happen within the company. There was a time we had like a false civil suit, which we won. I talk about all that in my book. And these different seasons like require going back and doing that 100% and being like, okay, it's not like I'm giving up on that branch or this branch, but I'm knowing this needs my energy, time, money, and focus. Even now, we're getting ready to expand at a whole other level with Dreamshine. And that's continuing to take more focus. I've purposely been like, all right, I'm pulling back on some of the podcast shows I've been doing. We've been doing like one a month for a while. I'm going to go back eventually in 2024 to the one a week. I've had to pull back and it's all good. I know why. There's a season, there's a strategy for all this. And then with the speaking, it started getting to a point where I started having some paid speaking events at different levels. Then from building on that, building the tree, building the books. And by the way, with my book, even with it being a bestseller, the first one, I learned a little lesson with some of the publishing world that I thought that I was going to have a lot more revenue coming in from like the 10,000 copies that we sold. And then when I saw some of the checks, they're like, oh no, you actually back owe this for blah, blah, blah. It's insanity. It's craziness. And I got a check, I think once for like 500, once for like 1,000. Um, it was pretty not close to what I expected. But then independently, I started selling them. That brought in more revenue, but it also helped lead to some of the speaking events. It all intertwined and those made more money. So in ways it all fed each other. It's still selling, by the way. It's still a bestseller. And I personally can sell copies. I sign them. That helps a lot more too. But through that, I learned for my next book how to self-publish. So for my second book, 16 Reasons Why Your Business Sucks, it's on Audible. So is The Story of You. But the difference is I own all of it now. And when it's on Amazon and stuff, they do take a percentage. So don't get that twisted either. But that's all good because it's gets it out there. And with Audible, that's a separate platform, but I have that set up on the back end. There's a percentage taken out of there too. But again, it's also not another huge chunk taken out by the publisher, which, by the way, different seasons, different levels of learning. I'm not making this all about books. I could do a million shows on that. But there's times where a publisher can be great. And I've had people do really well off of it. And they got great advances, and also it helped market them. And I've had people have horrible experiences. Either way, use it to grow and gain wisdom, just like with all things. So then what I started doing was continually working on, okay, now for my company, how do I start building up to where I have at least 6 months into savings of gross revenue? And that's not easy to do. And it's constantly, as the company grows, it's always more. There was a time when it was like 100,000, then 200,000, then 300,000, then 500,000, and then 1 million, then 1.5 million. Now we're getting closer to needing at least 2 million as we're continuing to grow. And with this whole next phase, it's going to bring us into the double digits. That's a whole other story. But anyway, what I'm saying is I started strategizing, and it never stops because payroll and stuff would come and it'd always be like, oh my God, why does this keep happening? And I'm stressing, I'm having to pull out all these lines of credit. And that was affecting those other 20% that I could be investing in that also I was passionate about. And so you've got to keep focusing on that tree, keep learning so you can keep getting those roots deeper and stronger. And now, when we have a payroll come across that's like $80,000, that's just to meet payroll, like the minimum, like biweekly. That we have so many more expenses than that. That's just one of the fixed expenses. Making sure that you have that built up so you have those funds available. Now, the first like years into this, there's no way I could have done that. I was even paying myself out of credit. And I'm not for debt. Like, don't try to get crazy into debt. It will become your slave master. Okay. But I am all about needing to use debt as a strategy, but then try to strategically make sure you're getting your way out of it. Now, at the highest level, and I've been asked this a lot, is you really want to get to a point. This is beyond the 7 streams of income to where you learn how to become your own bank. This is a game changer here. I'm actually making a note of that right now because that's a full show. That's after the 7 streams of income. That's the next level. Become your own bank. How to. I swear, I just think I heard my good man, Eric Thomas, ET, who's been on the show with my dude, Carl, who helped set up this whole studio. I think I just either he texted me or I saw the do a clip on talking about this with stocks and stock options in your company. And they were talking about all the taxes and stuff you have to pay. And one of the dudes on there is like, how do you get to a point where you see those dudes like they're like, no, don't pay me. I want the stock options. And then they take money out of that without actually cashing out their stocks and having to pay all the taxes off of it. There's so many different actual strategies at another level, which is where I call and what I have done and am doing how to become your own bank. And it's still an ongoing process. I only teach what I know from experience, but that's going to be a whole other show. So going back to it, then there is other things. I've had my personal real estate over the years where we've lived started with a condo we lived in, and then we had to rent it for a while because the recession hit and the money actually, it became like 20% under value. So I forget what it was called, a short sale. A lot of you listening probably haven't heard of that, but you might start hearing it again actually with how high these interest rates have raised. It has not hit the real estate yet. Anyway, I'm not here to predict all that, but I do think that it's going to hit it in some ways. There's no way it can't. But what a short sale is when we went to sell our first condo, which we got for like back in the day for like $55,000, I think, or 60. And that was a big deal to us when we were starting out. That was everything we had. I had just got married. We had our 2 kids back to back. And we've raised 5 total. But that was everything. That was just, that mortgage was rough just to meet that. And then we got to a point when we went to sell it. And because of the recession, what was now worth 60,000 was worth 40,000. So that would have meant to sell it. They're like, you would have to bring 20,000 out of your own pocket. You'd be losing to sell your house. That's what a short sale is. Okay. So what we did is we rented it out for, I think, like 6 years. And that wasn't on purpose to be like, oh, I want to focus on having a rental and have another form of income from that. That wasn't my plan. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think you also should get to a level, again, time, energy, and focus. Because everyone acts like everyone should have rental properties and all that. Well, maybe, but those dudes that have that $40 million a year company sure as hell don't agree with that. And that wouldn't have worked for them because they weigh out, no, that would take my time and focus away of what I want to be putting into our main tree. So just because everyone says it doesn't mean you have to do it. But again, over the years, we rented that out. Then, once the property finally caught back up to its value, we were able to sell it for some profit, purchased another house. So, I've had personal real estate, sold that, made money off that, put money into that, into another house. At times, I've even taken equity more than once or refinanced, took the loan out, used it strategically at a lower interest rate for my company, which I'm not recommending to do any of this exactly this way. There's different strategies for different seasons of your life, of your company, of your business. I'm just being authentic with you of what I have done. And then once we sold our last house, I remember I was like, thank God we paid this other loan off. We paid the mortgage off. We paid the second one off that we had put into the company. We had money to put down into our new house that we built in Florida, here in Boca Raton, where the new studio is. And now moving forward, I started then really getting into stocks personally. Over the years, our company has always had, we had a 401k we offer to our team members, our employees. And then I switched it to a simple IRA. That's only because for my team members and our employees at the size of our company, it made it so there's basically less administrative fees. That's how it works. That's how it was explained to me. And then the company is able to match up to 3%. So whatever team members put in, they choose out of their paychecks, it comes out pre-taxed, and then the company Dreamshine matches 3%. Now also, my company Dreamshine's an S corporation. And through that, I'm paid on payroll, and then I also make my money off distribution and draws. So being on payroll, I'm able to invest in my own simple IRA as an employer of my own company and then have my company match 3%. So I do the full amount into that, which is it only allows you to do, I think, as much as like we'll have to look it up. The numbers change, but it's like 12,500 or 12,800 a year, I believe. But I continue to max that out each year. That also helps me with some taxes and out of sight, out of mind. I don't look at it. That money just keeps going there. I just recently had a meeting with the dude that oversees it all. We switched up some of where some of my investments go. That's a whole other story, but that's automated. Okay. So that's something that I don't even look at that I built up. Now, I have some stupid disclaimer on here that says this is not financial advice, everyone. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, by the way. However, I am an experienced business owner for 17 years plus who has built up this literal tree that, no, it's not a literal tree, who has built up this tree, the 80/20 tree, that I'm sharing with you from my real life experience. So, anyway, separately, I started getting obsessed and learning tons about stocks. And I'm always listening on YouTube. There's some people I follow, even some groups that I learn. I'm always learning, I'm always educating myself. I became obsessed with them, and I personally invest some other streams. Again, sticking to that 20% model, the main 80s going into my company Dreamshine. But with some of that other 20%, I'm putting it into stocks. I have stocks on M1 Finance, on Robinhood. Besides my simple IRA, I even do some stuff like with options trading, but that's very, 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 very small scale, especially with options. And I didn't know what any of this crap was like 3 years ago. I've just become obsessed with it, put the time in, continue, and I'm still learning, of course. But with options and all that, I mean, I just do a very, very, very small amount, never something that you can't afford to lose. And if you lost it, it would not hurt you that much. Anyway, with the stocks, that's another source. I continue to invest in that. I've learned how I can actually use some of that for leverage to be my own bank at times. Again, I'm going to do a full show on that. And then let's see, you hear angel investors and all that. Over the years, through my podcast, I've had people ask me to invest in things at times, and some of it really hasn't made sense. And then also, sometimes I wasn't in the position looking at that 80/20. And then there's times where I've done some things that have done okay, some that have lost. And I just recently did one into a company that I truly believe in. I know the owner super well. I don't know if I'm allowed to publicly say it yet. I'll have to ask them when I can. But 20,000 shares, it hasn't IPO'd, it hasn't gone public yet. They're going public. And I got in at a really early rate to where I was able to get 20,000 shares into that company pre IPO. I didn't know what IPO and all this crap used to mean either. If anyone here is like getting confused by it, it's okay. But angel investor, that's another thing that I have in there. Stocks. And then where I have real estate, I don't personally own a lot of rentals, but I do own my own real estate that we live in that we've made money off. And then also my company, Dreamshine, owns real estate. And then we're also purchasing more land to grow our companies to serve more individuals with disabilities. And it's going to be rented as another LLC to my company, Dreamshine. And then we're actually starting to get into residential to group homes. But in all honesty, that other real estate is totally connected to that tree trunk. It just has to be formulated under another LLC. I don't want to overcomplicate it all. But anyway, these are some of the things that I have done and really talking about these different 7 streams of income. But what I really want you to understand and take away from this is don't start off thinking that to be wealthy, I immediately have to have 7 streams. I have to have a company. I have to have a book. I have to be speaking. I have to have a podcast. I have to have rental properties. I have to be an angel investor. I have to have stocks. If you try to do all that at once, your freaking tree is going to collapse. So focus that 100% for years, building that main company up so those roots go deep before you start getting to a level to start investing that other 20%. That's how I've done it. Look, for those other dudes, they focus pretty much their 100% in their main company for 17 years and nothing else. And they're making over 40 million a year. So just because someone says you have to do it this way or that way doesn't mean that it's the only way, or no one even breaks down what that truly means and how to get there. So that's why I did today's show with the famous Mark Minard's 80/20 money tree, the fallacy of the 7 streams of income myth, and how to freaking do it the right way. So that's it, everyone. Go out there, build your tree, focus on that tree trunk, focus on getting those roots deep and then branching out. And never settle, never give up, keep elevating beyond.